Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Baqee Special on Ahlulbayt TV, where we are thinking about what is actually happening out in Arabia, what has happened in the last year in terms of the destruction of Islamic heritage. And tonight I have two guests with me, and we're going to be looking at the destruction of the maqamat in Baqee and other maqamat around the Muslim world in the wider context of what is actually happening to Islamic heritage, what is happening from an archaeological perspective, what about the looting that is going on, and again, what can we actually do about it? So do feel free to call in also with your questions or comments. So I have my guest, Dr. Emma Cunliffe, who is at Endangered Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa organisation, I suppose, research centre in Oxford, and also Sister Zahra Kazmi, who is with Save Muslim Heritage as well. And so I wanted to welcome you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving us your time. So just to begin with, you're both working together on a campaign, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, Emma, what is the campaign about? And then I'll go into your work.
I also volunteer for an organisation called Heritage for Peace, which is a group dedicated to using cultural heritage to hopefully encourage peace-building efforts in Syria, particularly is where we're looking at the moment. And as part of that, one of our big goals this year is a project that looks at the responsibilities of the different people involved in the conflict under both Syria's national law, the framework of international law, and then also Islamic law. And whilst I'm reasonably familiar with international law, and we have a Syrian who is working with us on national law, we wanted to be able to bring in the perspective of Islamic law because we felt that was very important, which is why we chose to approach Save Muslim Heritage, who have been helping us with that.
Okay, that's interesting. So you saw the work that Save Muslim Heritage were doing, and you saw that there could be some cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good, because I remember Sister Zahra Kazmi that you started Save Muslim Heritage, and I mean it's really good to see that. It's interesting to see how that's progressed as well.
Definitely. I think when we initiated the campaign a few years ago, we were looking at more political means, speaking to MPs, institutions. Alhamdulillah, we as a grassroots campaign, we've dealt with obviously the grassroots going up to leadership, and the leadership has been really supportive, and they've taken this heritage issue to UNESCO, to MPs, to Parliament. So in terms of institution-wise, we've reached where we could, and I think we were actually working towards more strategy work in terms of giving advice to other organisations about how we could actually work together. So yeah, one of these projects has been working with Heritage for Peace.
That's brilliant. So inshallah we can talk more about Heritage for Peace and how maybe other people can also get involved and learn about what you're doing as well. And I think this is very important because tonight we're talking about unity among everybody in order to save Muslim heritage. And bringing people together and making them aware, because again it's quite easy to break off and work in your own isolated area. Dr. Cunliffe, I was going to ask you more about your work. You're an archaeologist, and first of all, what does that entail? I mean, I have an image of people brushing carefully the dust off ancient vases in the ground and things like that. So what does it involve? And also, how did you get involved in this particular area in terms of, the archaeology of the Middle East?
Well, there's plenty of brushing of dust. Surprisingly dusty profession, but my actual special area is I'm a satellite imagery analyst. So my project at Endangered Archaeology, we look at satellite images of the region, and we're assessing damage to archaeological sites and finding sites that aren't necessarily known about, and trying to record them and looking at the damage to them so we can assess not just the damage that you might see in the news quite a lot.
Right.
There's a lot of headline news stories, but they're all conflict related, whereas actually a significant amount of damage does come from urban development and from the expansion of agriculture. And part of our goal is, whilst we acknowledge the very real needs of the people in the region for food and for shelter, we're trying to either work with local authorities in those regions to look at ways that we can record damage in advance of major infrastructure projects, for example, but also without understanding really what those threats are and what the scale of the possibilities are, we can't really work out whether there are solutions we could look at to help preserve sites in the region.
Okay. How long has this organisation, the Endangered Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa, been going? And I suppose, obviously you will have seen a lot of changes happening. It's a very topical issue, topical area.
Well, the project itself actually only began January last year.
Okay.
We're funded by a grant from a charitable foundation called the Arcadia Foundation, and we have staff split between Oxford and Leicester. But the types of resources we're using involve aerial photography that goes back to the early 1900s. We have satellite images from some of the earliest missions flown by the Americans. They're called the Corona series. And then now declassified spy data from the 1960s, which obviously they don't show anything important in that sense now. But you can see what the landscape looked like before major mechanisation projects advanced and before, you had these huge urban sprawls moving, so we can really start to track the changes in what used to be there compared to what's there today.
So what's the general trend? I mean, I suppose looking at what has happened with the war in Syria and in Iraq as well. I don't know if you've also covered Arabia too. What is the general... I mean, we know, obviously, there's been really incredible destruction that has gone on in all of these countries. But, I mean, is that also, in some places, accompanied by new developments that are also destroying heritage as well? What are the changes that have gone on?
Well, if you take somewhere like Syria, for example, which is actually my speciality area, although I'm also doing some work in Saudi Arabia and some other regions, the studies we did originally from up to 2010 in Syria showed the usual sort of patterns of expanding agriculture, damaging sites. But then once you moved into sort of post-2011 conflict period, we actually started to see that whilst farming did continue in the regions, it was safe to do so. In a lot of sites, particularly even World Heritage sites, there was an increase in illegal building, for example, because one of the big things you don't really think about in a conflict period is that staff can't get to the sites to protect it. There's no one to say, no, you can't build here. So we have at least 2 World Heritage sites which have had quite considerable illegal building on them, just as a problem nobody really thinks about. And there's also a significant problem now with just neglected sites where people can't get to them to do just routine maintenance. It might be nothing initially when a tile falls off a roof, but suddenly you have a winter of rain damage and suddenly your problems get significantly more. And if you multiply that over several years, then...
That's it's very tragic. And also, of course, there's the looting. I mean, I was walking down a road I was hearing about the amount that's been looted from Iraq and Syria and finding its way into antique shops in London. And I was actually in an area in London, central London, one evening and looking through the shop window, and it's like something from Iraq, or you think, well, how did that get here? What's its story? And is this one of the illegal artefacts that has found its way into the windows? Because it seems to be quite a free-for-all in the way that things are brought over. So that must be a problem to track and trace and monitor and make a note of and stop as well.
It's actually a huge problem, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, partly the scale of destruction is something that I think in the UK, at least, we find it kind of hard to imagine, because you're talking about entire relatively preserved cities. I mean, literally entire cities, 120, 130 hectares that are now being turned over, and they look like the surface of the moon covered with craters where people have just been and dug. So we know a huge number of artefacts are coming out, but there are a lot of ways that you can bring them in, and that's very difficult. Even if you just forge the paperwork, you could say that you could pass the UN resolution that forbids trafficking in Syrian antiquities, for example, but then your dealer might just say, it's from Jordan. And obviously the borders are fine, it's very similar, But even if you didn't fake your paperwork, there was a shipment seized in America recently of clay tiles, apparently for a bathroom. But actually, these were all tablets that were thousands of years old.
Oh, gosh.
And the problem is you can forge your paperwork in that way. And unless you're suddenly going down the path of checking every single shipment that passes through your port, then they can come in. But to be honest, even ports aren't so much a problem now. eBay, WhatsApp, huge markets where you don't have to display your paperwork.
Right.
In eBay you are supposed to, but nobody checks it. So it's very easy to buy and traffic antiquities on eBay.
Wow.
There's a lot of ways to
It just sounds surreal, doesn't it?
A lot of ways to get them in, but unfortunately it's devastating to the country. I mean, like, if you take a little clay tablet, you know, it's by itself, it's very interesting. But, for example, there's a site called Ebla where they found a whole library, which I just think is a wonderful thing. Like, literally a whole library, complete with shelves. And together it indicated how people 5,000 years ago thought about their world, how they constructed it and the way they made their worldview. And we can never put that back together. If you loot a site, that is completely gone. You can never say, this came from this place and it told us about the people at this time. And it loses the whole rest of the story. It's like just having one page out of a book and you'll never know the beginning or the end. It really is. I mean, and again, considering that it's been there for thousands of years and we're really in a new era where all of this is, you know, gone forever. And perhaps I will ask also, we can ask what we can look out for. I mean, perhaps we've got some online activists who might go on eBay and, you know, what do you do if you find a tile on eBay that's from, you know, Babylon or something like that, or some ancient site? I mean, should our viewers go to your organisation and get in touch with you, or? Not us. The people to tell. For example, Interpol maintains a database of stolen antiquities. If you find a site on Facebook, they will shut it down because they are illegal.
Right.
So the best thing to do is to inform your, you know, relevant authorities. So, for example, if you have an antiquities authority, to let them know, to tell the site so they can get that closed.
Right. Okay.
And at the end of the day, it is a stolen object. Tell the police.
Right. Okay. Okay, so, and Sister Zahra Kazmi, I mean, again, what we're talking about is the unity among everybody, and this is what I was talking about last night also with Dr. Rafana Alawi as well. He was saying that, you know, in this day and age, with what's happening, we have to come forward and unite together for the sake of, you know, this precious heritage. He was saying that he has had some problem with ulama on the Sunni side. I mean, he's a Sunni, but he's a problem with some ulama on the Sunni side, because if they put a name to supporting the destruction of Jannat al-Baqi, they'll be accused of being Shia, and they don't want to do that. And so he's had a lot of difficulty drumming up the support for this, and he was saying we just need to put ourselves out of the picture, in a sense, and make this central for the sake of the whole world, the Ummah. We all care about it. You know, we need to unify. What's been your experience in, you know, running this campaign? Have you found similar difficulties in bringing people together?
First of all, his comments, Dr. Alawi, is absolutely right. We need to look at the bigger picture here. It's not about a sect. It's not about a religion. It's not about a particular culture, minority. This is, you know, our group and Heritage for Peace are working together. It's really primarily identified as a humanitarian issue. Cultural heritage, religious heritage belongs to, you know, humanity. It doesn't belong to a sect. So absolutely I support what he said. In our experience of what we've held conferences where we've had Christian scholars speaking, Shia Sunni speakers. We've always had this element of bringing in the united voice. We're not speaking for Shias. We are speaking for, you know, for Muslims, because we've never had a voice on grassroots level to say to the wider world that this, and to our own inner interfaith issues with the you know, the ideology behind most of the destruction, that this is something that the majority of Muslims are against. So our experience has actually been in contrast. We've had a lot of support. The Sunnis have been very supportive. Shias, yes, we were very passionate. And if you look at the data, and again, it was from a conference we attended at Oxford University, Safe Muslim Heritage did back in autumn, and the data they provided was about 39% of Shia sites to date that have been destroyed, but 34%, I believe, is Sunni Sufi. So it's not something that is, just targeting Shias. We are all affected by this. Whether you have a faith, like I said, it's, you may just be interested in Babylon as a heritage site. There may be ruins. At the weekend, we were in Holland discussing our project, and we were talking about, there may be a mount somewhere. It means absolutely nothing to anybody.
Yeah.
But in Emma's, professionalism, they know that dates back thousands of years. So again, this is heritage that belongs to Iraq, could be to Syria, wherever it is. So it's predominantly to a particular area. So yeah, we've had a lot of support, and I think the frustration comes is, what can we do about it? We have a lot of people from grassroots who say, how can we get involved? And that's where the issue comes in, that we're all quite helpless, and that's where our campaign came into place, because we've got to provide that voice to the majority to say, and alhamdulillah, a lot of people are taking more notice inside Muslim areas, that leaders are doing more to raise this awareness. Like you're saying, it's a topical hot issue. We've got the conflict to be dealing with, and when you talk to archaeologists, actually there's such a different perspective you get. What is Islamic heritage? Islamic heritage isn't just a religious heritage. It's it could be those mounds I'm saying. It could be a ruin. This is a heritage belonging to a Muslim country. Again, you look at Christian heritage, Jewish heritage. Our countries date thousands back, and they were, Jews were there before, Christians were there, but then Muslims came. But do we go and destroy that heritage because it's not belonging to our religion? Well, no. We've got ample examples in Quran. So yeah, our example, we've had a very positive, and that's why we're saying we come from different backgrounds, but we have a common cause, which is heritage. So it's something we all do need to unite under.
I mean, something that struck me yesterday was when Dr. Alawi said how, as an example, in India, a lot of Muslims haven't heard what's going on. Because again, I was thinking, well, we just talk about it, but we don't really, what can we actually do to stop it? And he said that some of his lectures were distributed on CD, and people, got hold of them, heard of them, and they were actually outraged. They didn't know what was going on, and they said, we will fight to our last breath to stop the destruction going on. And I think that, like you say, you feel helpless, but on the other hand, I mean, that kind of changed my thinking last night, because I was thinking, what do? We just talk about it, and I thought, actually, not many people know, and perhaps, if more people did know, then there would be a lot more pressure on leaders. Because he was saying in Arabia how there had been 2 sites that were set for destruction, and it happened to get out in the media. The population of Arabia actually heard about it, and they were absolutely shocked, and put it to the monarchy and said, what's going on? And so the government had to deny that they had planned to destroy this site, and they didn't, because the people were so outraged.
What I find interesting about Saudi Arabia is because on one hand they have destroyed Islamic heritage, we know that, and Dr. Alawi will have the more evidence of that, but then they are promoting their own Saudi family heritage, and they're somewhere in Saudi Arabia they're having a whole heritage city built for them under their name. So there's a paradox going on there. But I think, like you said, it doesn't just fall upon our leaders to do something. We as a public have a voice, and it is about raising awareness, and we should know what's going on. And it's, like I said, learning from all corners, not just what your scholars are telling you, but go out and do research. And this is something it will cost us dearly. I mean, you're talking about, looking at satellite imagery of potholes. Well, at the end, we won't know a lot about Syrian heritage or Iraqi heritage years in the future. We're not talking about today. We're talking about the future. It's
a permanent destruction. I mean, also, as you say, it's a humanitarian issue as well, and how it's a violation of human rights. Again, I mean, last night Dr. Alawi was making the point that the pyramids were there in the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon his holy progeny, and he never sent out anybody to take them apart or destroy them. And Egypt actually played a very prominent political role in the political situation after the death of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. So, and he was saying that this is evidence that he didn't send people out to destroy things. So why is it that now these groups are starting to deciding to do that? But I mean, I suppose if like you were saying, Dr. Cunliffe, about how you're looking at Islamic law and also other forms of law, and just to give us one point before we go to break, what has struck you with regard to Islamic law in terms of how this situation is how it's framed within Islamic law, how it affects rights in Islam?
Well, to be honest, that's not really an area that I'm comfortable speaking to, which is actually exactly why we went to Save Muslim Heritage, because we wanted to be able to reach out to as many Muslim experts in that area as we could, so that it wasn't just us coming in with our sort of Western academic perspective,
right,
really. Because we can speak to our own laws and customs, but we really wanted that perspective from the Islamic community to see, because we really believe that actually we would find quite a lot of similarities between the different frameworks that would provide the tools for the people on the ground protecting heritage to say, well, actually, you're saying one thing, but really here are all the reasons that isn't the case.
Right. Yeah. So inshallah, well, after the break, we can talk about this more, because I think that's very interesting. I mean, we've had some narrations, a hadith that are talking about the legitimacy of building mausoleums. But inshallah, we can talk about that further and perhaps highlight that more. We're just about to go to break. Do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. Inshallah, we'll see you in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Baqee Special on Ahlulbayt TV, where we are discussing what can actually be done about the destruction of Muslim heritage across the Muslim world, and not just in Arabia as well, but looking at this as a general trend that is going on across the whole region. And we were just about to talk about the issue of Islamic law, in terms of how these sites and these artifacts are part of humanity's heritage, and that to loot that is a violation of rights. Is that correct? It's a violation of what is the Islamic perspective on that? I mean,
I'm not a scholar, but the brief research we have done, we've actually nominated through some very good contacts in London, particularly Mustafa Field, who's been very helpful to provide the research by academics in Iraq.
Okay.
So we have Sunni Shia, and they will give us so we've given our criteria to them to tell us what Quran tells us, what the Sunnah of the Prophet was, what historians have told us about the heritage and how we're meant to preserve culture, travelling, valuing what we have, respecting Abrahamic faiths, not whether it's a faith or no faith, and also contemporary scholars as well. So they will be giving us the research. But what our own research briefly has said, for instance, there's a part in Imam Ali's will where he says, travel to the ruins, look at what we've left behind. And even in Quran, when you look at it, there's so many ways God is teaching us the lessons and guiding us. And then one of the lessons is travel. Yeah. Go and look. And
travel in the land and see,
see the ones
what happened with the previous generations before you.
So these are, and so I think when you're in a conflict, as Syrians are, as Iraqis are, I think the predominantly the focus is there at the moment because it's something that's rampant at the moment, and there's deliberate heritage destruction, as we saw with Balad last week. So what we're hoping to do is re-educate people. I think the focus of Islamic values, which we abide by, the Sharia is our life moral system, our how we're meant to live. So to teach people back, this is what Quran says. Remind yourselves, looting, it's stealing. Yes, I don't know what the moral ethical answer would be if you're on the verge of starving and then there's this piece of heritage, would you go and sell it? I don't know. We're not in that situation. But again, it's just to remind people that this is what Islam says. and that is what we abide by if we believe in this religion. So
yeah, you were going to say?
Well, I think one thing that we've been finding as Heritage for Peace, we have obviously a lot of contacts involved in heritage protection work in the region, and in at least one case that we know of so far, an armed group came in and took over a museum and discovered where the collections of the museum were hidden, and obviously the museum workers were rather horrified at this. And even though this was a very well-armed group and obviously quite interested in the financial resources available, their heritage staff went and tried to negotiate with them to protect the collection and prevent it being sold. And they were able to then approach completely different armed groups. I mean, this is obviously a great risk to themselves.
Yeah.
And persuade them to intervene, and they decided to convene an Islamic Sharia court. And actually the court then ruled, by considering Islamic precedents, that, as I think you may have cited earlier, in fact, when the Prophet came to the area, he didn't destroy things or sell off the previous antiquities, so they shouldn't either. And the court found that that was probably the right verdict, and have now decided to protect the collection and are guarding the museum.
Wow.
So that's actually an amazing example of the ways not only...
It's interesting how that worked, and they actually listened and they took it on board.
I think it does. I mean, I think that's really significant, both because it indicates the level of devotion of some, fundamentally archaeologists. We're not all like Indiana Jones, going out there and really, putting themselves at great risk for this.
Yeah.
But also of the importance of being able to provide people with the tools to understand why heritage protection is important.
Yeah.
And in a sense as well, it does bring, in a small scale, but a level of peace to those areas, because it's something that actually these different groups all have in common.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating when you can see. I mean, I was in Lebanon once, up in Baalbek, and you see the inscriptions on what were Roman ruins, and then for each generation that comes along, there's a new inscription. And it puts things into perspective. I mean, like us to be a human being on the, the temporary nature of this life, and the fact that we will go, in the same way that those before us went. And so when you do reflect on these ruins, it puts you into perspective. You're not kind of like, you're not going to be here forever. You're not it, as we used to say at school. But there were people before you, and they have also formed that history. So I think that's just one thing. But that's interesting also that you said that they actually, like you said, they risked their lives to try to negotiate this, and perhaps maybe this could be done on a wider scale. I don't know if that's possible, if to actually set up these courts or to actually get some kind of authoritative rulings put in place. I don't know what you think of that. I mean, with regard to...
We're hoping with the work of the project that it does do something along those lines, where we have the authority from the highest orders, from whether Sunni, Shia, but there's a united Muslim voice to say that this, to object to whether it's looting, whether it's destroying religious, cultural heritage, that we have a voice to oppose the one that is actually destroying.
Yeah.
So that maybe they'll get educated, the ones that are doing it, because often taking orders, and they may not think that what they're doing is wrong. So to give them the alternative voice of what actually Islam is saying, and the evidence. I mean, as you rightly said, look at the pyramids. All this heritage since the inception of Islam has not been destroyed. Why now? And we're at a precedental era at the moment and level that we've not seen this. And as Muslims, we've not needed to come out and defend heritage as we are going to need to now. Yes, we look at Al-Baqi, and again, we could say that was a state decision to make, but this is an ideology that's spreading now, and it's doing a very... I say good job because it's for them, but it's detrimental to humanity. Yeah. And we must act. We have to.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that all over the world. All of these mausoleums, being blown up, all because of, the misunderstandings of Quran or hadith that are questionable as well. And, I mean, it's kind of interesting as well. It has struck me that why, in particular, the emphasis, on this, I don't know what your view is, Emma, as well, that, out of all the things that these type of groups could do, and I've always said it, I've said it over the years, that why not just focus on building roads instead? I mean, we need some good roads out there. Why not focus on construction? We need schools. I mean, you probably need new pipes, new, water works, and both of your opinions. I mean, in your view, Emma, why is there this particular emphasis on destroying buildings? What do you feel is behind it in your work?
We don't really understand it yet, and there is certainly a lot of work ongoing to try and understand it better. Partly it's linked to just being able, when you take over a new area and you destroy some of the buildings, it's linked quite simply to being able to control and subjugate the population. It's evidence of your dominance, of your control over the area, and of what those people suddenly are and are not allowed to do. When you look at Daesh, who do these big sort of performative videos, a lot of that seems to be very propaganda-oriented. That when they record their actions, they then release these videos timed to specific events. Often, actually, you can also look at them timed to military events, like when they're losing.
Right.
They suddenly release a new video in the hopes that the West will suddenly go, oh no, some heritage is being destroyed, instead of actually focusing on what's really happening.
Right.
And that's actually really dangerous, because you need to really keep sight of the people that are behind all of this. And actually that has been a trend that we've seen. So, for example, the destructions at Palmyra really sort of appealed to a Western audience, and that, as one person cynically remarked, might be because a significant number of British politicians at the moment studied classics, and they all knew Palmyra.
Right.
Maybe not, I don't know. But also there are so many sites that are being destroyed that don't make little videos and that don't get reported, and that you hear about from contacts in the area, that you can see on satellite imagery. And so you can track all these buildings that nobody mentions. Perhaps in a lot of cases they're associated with communities that have been forced to flee, so there's nobody there suddenly to report what's happened, and that's awful.
I was going to say, so do you think, it's really the sites where they're making the videos or highlighting what they are doing are tourist sites, or whereas there are many of these other smaller sites that are being blown up are not being highlighted so much in the media because they're just not of any interest, or not known kind of by a Western audience as well. So, I mean, they're performing, aren't they? They're sort of performing to an audience, and so they know that. I think when the shrine of Hajar ibn Adi was blown up, that didn't really get out in the media because in the West no one knew who he was and what his significance was. So I think that some handmade video was made, but it wasn't as dramatic as something like Palmyra as well.
It really is a media bias, unfortunately, in that sense.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder how much of the Western audience predicted that they would spread their destruction to cultural heritage. We know with the ideology that it has destroyed, anything that is what they deem as worshipping at a grave, which really baffles me. Like, how are we worshipping? Am I praying to this dead person? It's a reflection. We visit our parents' graves, we visit a holy, saint. It's because we're learning from their as an example. But when they are talking about, so I think when Hajar ibn Adi happened, for us as Muslims, it was like, okay, are they heading towards Damascus, Lady Zainab's shrine? And in the back of my mind, I was, for us who were initiating this campaign, thinking this is going to spread. These people are that vicious. It will not be just limited to the people of, for Muslims and their history. But going back to, you were asking Emma before about why they're doing it. I mean, the fact that they're doing it and they're not building, constructing, and and helping economies proves that they are, the perfect lot of people not to be siding with and supporting. Had they been productive, people would have been supporting. Okay, what is this ideology? It's actually very positive for the economy. They're going into communities and they are ripping communities out. We were speaking to, we've had meetings with Ismailis and various people, quite high-ranking. They've said, and Mustafa was one person who took a delegation of Sunni Shia imams to Iraq earlier this year. And he said that in communities where he'd spoken to people, they were saying that we used to live as Iraqis. So in Iraq, we didn't have an identity of you're Christian, you're Muslim, you're this, you're that. We all protected each other's heritage. And what Daesh have done, have gone in and divided people, scared people, murdered people. And when they've done that, people have sort of backed off and said, okay, if you're going to attack that church, it's got nothing to do with us. Whereas before, it would be, no, these are our neighbours. These are principles that Islam teaches about unity, about community. They're destroying that cultural element as well of Muslims, which, we have the whole hospitality, everything.
Yeah.
So it's not just a tangible culture they're attacking. They're attacking the fragments of society, that gel of society together. And people are frightened, they're fleeing, and they don't care what's happening to their neighbours, because it's survival of the self first. So what their destruction is doing, it's quite...
I was going to ask as well, in terms of working with Christians, because a lot of Christians have fled Iraq, and, and in Syria, churches have been destroyed. In fact, there was that nun as well who, in fact, I haven't heard about her for the last few months or maybe even a year or so. The nun who was in Syria, she came out. I don't know if you remember her. Yes, yeah, and she came out quite publicly and was speaking again about, how... what was being done was wrong, Islamically and from a Christian perspective as well. So do you both work attacked and marginalised, a bit like Shia feel, although I know Christians don't like being compared to Shia. I've seen that as well. They say, no, our beliefs are not the same, but there's the same feeling that they have been marginalised and targeted and no one has stuck up for them or stood by them. So have you spoken?
Not specifically in the Middle East region.
Right.
Although I'm aware of a lot of Christian work that is going on in the UK, for example, to work with Syrian refugees.
Do you speak to Christians much in Iraq or in Syria, or do you with Christian archaeologists or Christian sites? Is there a kind of a view that, like you said, in Syria, Muslim sites that are being destroyed are, of the same value as the Christian sites that are being destroyed, and that everyone is still that thing?
For example, there's a famous Christian site called Malula, which is one of the only places in the world where Aramaic, which is the dialect that was spoken at the time of Jesus, it's still spoken there today. It's 2,000 years, which is amazing. And it has a large number of monasteries and churches. There's been a lot of fighting in the city, various sort of terrorist or sort of very extremist, whatever you want to call them, various groups rolled in, and then eventually the army was able to remove them, after which point they discovered they had removed all the bells from the churches so they couldn't call the Christians to prayer. They destroyed a lot of the icons in the churches, exhumed some of the saints, depressingly similar things actually than you would also see them doing in mosques and other areas, just pure vandalism. But then the people that have been rebuilding that, you can really see the Christian community help each other rebuild. And you see that in Old Homs, for example, as well, the areas that are now stable from the fighting. It's these communities really coming together to rebuild and work together and help each other rebuild their communal history and function together as a community. In the groups that we talk to as archaeologists, it mustn't really, it's very issued. People we speak to, they're heritage workers, and it doesn't matter what that heritage is or who that heritage belongs to. It's this idea of a shared part that is a collective responsibility.
Yeah, that's good that some of that is happening. But there's been a definite move to kind of get Christians out.
One of our colleagues on Heritage for Peace is a Christian Syrian, so he's very passionate about his heritage, as Father Nadim is. And having spoken to his father Nadim, he's always said that Muslims generally, where he comes from, his area, not enough is being done. Muslims and the people you meet and the feedback you get. But part of our project is to unite not only Muslims, Sunni, Shia, Ismaili, Sufis, everybody, but we want to also speak out to the people that aren't going to be having a voice. And be the Christians and Jews as well. There's a lot of Jewish history in Iraq that's being destroyed. One of the Jewish prophets was attacked, and his shrine blown up for Jonah. So these are back to Iran. Go back and the prophets that are mentioned, they're not all. There's one Prophet Muhammad. The rest are all pre-Islam. So the respect that God has shown them, we have to. That is extended to us too. So why are we attacking churches and don't forget that one of the covenants of Prophet Muhammad in Medina to the Christians and Jews was talking about the heritage of the churches. So we're going against the principles of Islam here by attacking churches, by attacking holy places of worship. So is it education that we need to give back to these people? Say, conflict is one thing, political, gambling, but the places of heritage, respecting, why are they exhuming bodies? It doesn't matter if it's Hujra others are trying to exhume, or, in churches, that's not even humane. You're saying it's a Muslim act, So.
I think this is still sort of, we're still not quite sure of, who is behind it and why these things are being done. Obviously, in some way, ostensibly, it looks like, yes, it's down to the Wahhabi ideology. And I think even as we know, for those who are, on social media, they would have seen even one or two of the scholars from Arabia have said, yes, they do share our tenets, they do share our interpretation and our ideology. And yes, this is a possible outcome of the way we interpret things. They've actually said that. But we don't know sort of what more is behind it. But I think, like you say, in terms of education, I think definitely just recently, because I don't engage in a lot of discussion online, but recently I mentioned, I was in a group, I didn't know who was in this group, but I mentioned the Hadith al-Thaqalain, and quite a few people in that group hadn't heard of it. There were Sunni people who hadn't heard of it. So this is where, the Holy Prophet says, I leave you two weighty things, the Quran and my progeny, Ahlulbayt, my family, and follow those two and you'll never go astray. And some people in the group had never heard of it. Some of the Sunnis in that had never heard of it. And they said, this is lies. And I said, well, it's in the Sunni Hadith books. And I'm just wondering whether... again, with Save Muslim Heritage, whether, like you say, part of that is educating people, although I don't know how easy it is to educate people who would have signed up to something like this movement.
But don't forget, people who've signed up, some have left because they've realised going there how militant their interpretation is. They went with an image of, this is a Khalifa, this is, going to restore peace and, equality in the world, and they went there and it was completely something else. So, again, we haven't needed to defend heritage or, our shrines or cultural heritage up till now because we've never seen it on this scale. Yes, we've generally had people coming in, wars, whatever. So now we've got to have our scholars come out and say, right, this is the evidence, because don't forget that ideology are very good at defending what they do and why they do. Again, if someone said, what if Wahhabi challenged you? I said, I just have to sit with one and understand what goes on in their head. Because why are you saying we're worshipping a dead person? Because it's not what people I know and what we go and do. So again, it's reiterating what are the basics, but a lot of knowledge gets seeped up because, we kind of go through, yes, my parents said, you respect, you learn those, there's traits from, whether you pick up your books yourself or from your family, whatever you do. But it's actually getting the evidence out. now and saying black and white, this is wrong, and we have to have a united voice to say that.
Yeah. So have you managed to get many scholars involved?
We had a lot of, backing, support from our scholars. I think as we're going along, we're realising how much there needs to be done, and we can't do it without the knowledge of the scholars.
Yeah.
So we're sort of a gelling agent. We'll join the dots, and whether that's at grassroots, so we want the future to do a piece. The scholars, we need, like I said, we've spoken to Ismailis, Sufis of, Sunnah, Sunni, Shia, because we all have the same stance, and it's re-educating the masses again, and those people that are not so guided. And maybe perhaps, let's have a discussion about this. What is going on, and what is the interpretation? But only the people with the knowledge and the expertise can do that.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes pushing along leadership.
I wonder also whether, like you say, communicating with some people who have left this movement, and even one or two of, we know that there's one or two sort of high-profile scholars who are of the Wahhabi ideology who have also left. As well, either come to the Shi'i path, or at least they've turned their back on this ideology. So I wonder whether getting them on board as well.
We have one actually.
You do.
So it's fantastic, because it's not about scoring points with anyone or saying we're better. It's not. It's let's get the evidence out, and let's analyse it and be logical with what we're arguing here, because the cause of our actions, like I said, it's detrimental to our future generations, detrimental to us today.
Yeah.
As Emma has said, there's people sacrificing their lives, and they've looked at the bigger picture. It's not about this is my shrine and this is my church. Yeah. They're doing it for humanity. They're saving whatever is that country's heritage. And I think, you applaud them. It's amazing.
I think we have to think to the future that when peace comes, God willing, then there will be a lot of armed men that will go home. Yeah. And we can't just write them off and say, oh, well, they, had some controversial views. We have to think about what will happen when that comes. How do we reach them? Because we can't just turn our backs on them.
That's a very good point. What's going to happen, when there is that fallout? That's something else that we need to think about and be ready for as well. I think
that's something we're sort of starting to look at. So, we've been quite interested in models that have been used in other areas for, like post-genocide Rwanda, for example.
Right.
And looking at the ways that you can try and build common ground between communities to build, obviously, and rebuild. Hoping those can be used in situations like this.
Very good example there. We're just about to go to another break. We will be here, inshallah, till 9:30. So do keep watching, and we will be back again in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Baqee Special on Ahlulbayt TV, where we are looking at the wider picture tonight in terms of the destruction of Muslim heritage that is going on not just in Arabia but across the Muslim world. Very valuable artifacts that have been there for thousands of years being looted and finding themselves in antique shops around the world, and packed up in shipments and then smuggled through under the guise of being something else. The issue of actually trying to raise awareness to Muslims on the value of this heritage, why we need to speak up for it, and what can be done about it, what we can do about it as well. So we were just talking also about the issue of unity, like we're saying, and the issue comes up also about the media playing a role in dividing communities and stirring all of this up. I mean, it's like one big error that's been made in the last few years about what's happening in Iraq is that, it's a Sunni-Shia conflict, or Syria, it's a Sunni-Shia conflict, when actually there are so many other factors involved, and actually Sunnis and Shias have very often worked together against the destruction that's going on. I mean, Emma, are you aware of your work countering what's going on in the media? I mean, obviously, you're working on a much higher professional level with what is going on in this region, and you must see a kind of a contrast between the kind of dramatic way that things are presented in the media, almost like cinema, you know, kind of images, and actually what's happening on the ground. And do you find that the media is not helpful in terms of, you know, you trying to do your work and trying to preserve what's there?
It varies hugely. It is actually just dependent on the journalist. I mean, sometimes you get opportunities to come and really discuss the issue, for which thank you very much. I write my own articles I tend to write for The Conversation, because then I can tell the story I want to. I can highlight the things that I think are important and stress the bigger picture, where, I mean, a lot of journalists might just pick one thing and then blow it, what I would think is blow it out of proportion.
Right.
But it means there's a huge amount of work to be done in awareness raising of this biggest picture, because, as you say, it's not just a sort of a sectarian conflict and trying to reduce it to a sort of, you know, clickbait headline.
Yeah.
You fail to understand what's really going on in most cases, and that's something that we're so desperately trying to avoid, to raise understanding of all the different ways things intersect in this awful problem.
And one thing you were saying actually in the break, which I think is an important point to bring up, is how you know, if one shrine is destroyed, then, you know, there's often a kind of a counter, you know, reprisal movement where someone else's shrine or someone else's church will be destroyed, and that really everybody needs to, although it sounds so easy to say that, but everybody needs to just stop doing the same thing to each other as a way of, you know, expressing their hurt or expressing their anger or, you know, trying to destroy the other community, and that everybody needs to recognise that, again, we all are sharing in this heritage, and that this has got to stop being a way that people are, you know, expressing what they want to say. I mean, you were saying the sheer number of shrines and sites that have been destroyed that hasn't come in the media.
Yeah. I mean, there are hundreds, so very, even just, and it's not a very recent phenomenon. This isn't something in the last couple of years. Like when the Al-Asqari Mosque was bombed in 2006, there were 32 reprisal attacks the next day.
Right.
And I mean, that's a huge number, and it's a very visceral way of expressing your hurt, but then you get to a point where everybody's hurting, and everybody has to find a way to move past that.
Yeah, and I, as you say, I mean, looking at the long term and thinking what kind of country, because again, you look at Syria and parts of it are just, there's nothing left. So you think, well, what are you fighting for? You know, because everything's been destroyed now. I mean, Zahra, what do you think that can be done to? Do you feel that the media makes things worse, and in terms of stirring up this conflict or oversimplifying it, and actually perhaps even not highlighting enough the issue of heritage? I mean, we're always looking at, you know, the media looks at things strategically. So this group is in this town, this group is in this town, this group has taken this town, this group has taken this town. And then you get some footage of, you know, missiles going off and, you know, bombs going off. But we don't actually see a lot of footage of, although of course we can see in general, like with Aleppo, that's just literally rubble. But we don't actually see a kind of a listing of, well, this is what was here, this is what was here, this is what was here, and that's been gone. So that the heritage side of it is not being highlighted, perhaps.
And I think in terms of the media, it is selective. You know, journalism, it has its pros and it has its cons. I think everybody naturally knows what they're familiar with. That's human nature. So when they're reporting on Palmyra, there'll be whole sections and there'll be experts coming out and saying, you know, this, you know, but this has been something we as Muslims have been saying it's not acceptable, but it was because it was our heritage. Islam, from an outside perspective, it's not easy for them. I mean, I always say never put people into boxes, never put situations into boxes, because there's always, exceptions to those rules. So if you're looking at a very simplistic way, as you said, Sunni Shia, when Hujr ibn Adi's, he was a companion of the Prophet. He was not Shia Sunni, he was a companion. We're all affected by these, by the destruction. So the media, perhaps a naivety, perhaps ignorance, perhaps lack of information, they can bundle Muslims up, but we know how complex our cultures are. We know how religion is not easy to understand. So perhaps getting knowledge from the real experts would overcome that. But certainly, from their perspective of saying Palmyra is, as we were saying earlier, the colonial issue, at the end, we've got to look above that. These are heritage sites of Syria, and this is her heritage, and that's what's important to, perhaps the media could be a bit more balanced of what they're reporting. Because the religious shrines, Emma has said, when the Al-Asqari Mosque was, bombed 2006, 32.
That's research from Deakin University in Australia.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal amount, reprisal.
And it had a corresponding increase in the body count as well, both of, the not just the troops that were in the area, but also the civilian body count and the Iraq body count index just went.
But also, it's interesting you're saying it's an Australian university that's making a note. Where are the Islamic universities? Where are are you in touch with any universities in the Muslim world that are also working on this and making reports? And
I will be completely honest and say we are struggling with the language barrier.
Right.
There was a conference in Fayoum in April that was looking at, in fact, exactly what we're doing, the protection of cultural heritage under Islamic, both in terms of Islamic law, but also just Islamic cultures generally and what different states are doing and protection efforts and things like that. So we've been talking to them.
Okay.
Having said that, the Deakin University project, just as an example, has quite a lot of Middle Eastern scholars working on it.
So they have, so they've got, but again, that's a good point that it's just a practical issue with regard to language, and this is why, again, you teamed up with, say, Muslim Heritage, maybe one of the reasons. And
but I think also that we are slow on, as Muslims, to be on evidence, on research. There is so much research that needs to be done, and even in terms of listing what we have. Why, the heritage sites, there's and what's been destroyed. That hasn't been done. It's just so much to do, and, it's a phenomenal.
It's not a fashionable career.
No, it's not. Absolutely.
So being an archaeologist is, the Muslim world is famous for, my child has got to be a doctor. Or a lawyer, or but if you were to say my child is an archaeologist, people go, what? So right. Okay, but I think this shows that the times that we're living in now show a need for dramatic reappraisal of what is important, and I'm having conversations with people even today where they say, just talk about marriage, let's say, it's like, yes, I got the person I want, he's a doctor, or my daughter is a medical professional in this or that, and it's said with great pride. And of course, studying medicine isn't easy, but as we know, there are a lot of doctors out there, Muslim doctors out there, and I don't know, with regard to the destruction of the sites in the Muslim world, there may be not so many Muslim archaeologists. I don't know, Emma, are you aware of, is there a shortage? Do you feel there's a shortage?
In the conflict areas, there is now, because so many people have been forced to leave, of course, which is a terrible thing. And we know like 15 Syrian archaeologists have been killed whilst carrying out their work.
Wow.
But, yes, there are still quite a high number. There's a real need for training, and that's a big problem now with so much destruction in terms of the, places you would have formerly received training. Obviously, Damascus University is still there, but many of the others are shut. I shut the Department of Archaeology at Mosul University, and a lot of the other departments for that matter.
Okay.
So there's going to be a real need for training for new staff, certainly.
Right.
But there are people out there, and they're very dedicated, and they do want to do that and to help. So.
Yeah. So any of our young people out there, I get people writing to me saying, I want to do something, to help, and can you give me some ideas of what to do? This is something that they could do.
It's fascinating, really is fascinating.
Train as an archaeologist and work to save Muslim heritage.
I mean, to be honest, the bane of our life is identifying the sites. If you don't know where it is, you can't protect it. And that sounds such a simplistic thing, and you might be so familiar with your church at the end of your road or your mosque that you go to, but if we don't know where they are, we can't work to protect them, we can't help to protect them, and if it comes to rebuilding it, we can't prioritise the resources because we don't know if we've got 150 or 500.
Wow.
And actually, I mean, that's actually something I spend a lot of my days doing, is trying to find the report. You get a report through that, the Mosque Khidi Elias has been destroyed, and you're like, okay, right, where is that?
Okay.
It's forever, it's such a silly thing.
Yeah. And also, as you said, that with regard to the looting, I mean, you gave the example of a shipment in the States that was trying to get through, pretending to be some tiles for a kitchen. And again, if people are not trained, then they can easily, I mean, again, all this looting can go on because, again, people might be sort of buying something nice, they won't realise its value. We've just got a caller that's just come in, so we'll just take the call. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zahra, and I am from Aligarh Muslim University, India. And I know some departments who must be very useful for my sister who is working in archaeology. So can I contact her and can guide her or help her in that way?
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, that's wonderful. Yes, and you're calling in from India as well, so it's good to see that we're being watched over there. Very nice, and salam to everybody there as well. But yes, please, that would be great. I think for some assistance. Emma, you want to say something?
That would be great. We would love to be able to spread our network to as many countries as possible. We've been absolutely delighted by the amount of care and interest actually people in India have been showing about this issue. So knowing who to talk to about it more specifically and help coordinate work there would be fantastic.
Thank you so much. So if you don't mind, if you could leave your contact details with Hussein, who took your call, or also please write to info@ahlulbayt.tv, info@ahlulbayt.tv. The address is also on the Ahlulbayt TV website. That would be a way of please giving your details. Or just, like I said, call the number and give the details to Hussein, who took your call. So that's very encouraging to see. And I think, like you said, and like I said last night when I was thinking, well, all we do is talk, but actually it needs to be highlighted more, because I feel as well it's kind of a minor issue. I mean, because of all of the destruction that's going on around the year, this comes up because of Jannat Al-Baqi and everything. We talk about this at this time of year, and then it starts to sort of slip off the agenda. I mean, Zahra, how are you? What are the struggles that you found in keeping this on the agenda? What are some of the challenges?
Oh, I'm really passionate about it personally.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because we've travelled so widely that you appreciate, different cultures. But in terms of barriers, I think generally when you're dealing with whether it's grassroots, I haven't had any sort of negative, experiences. I think people are always passionate to do more. They think, how can we volunteer? How can we help our time? And then we have leaders, which in their capacity of their work, they have so many issues to deal with. Yeah. They're quite relieved that there's someone who's working on heritage, and then you can just help them say, okay, I need your assistance here, and they're happy to provide that. So I think we generally around the year are fortunate that we don't peak at certain times. I mean, in Washington today, they've got Al-Baqi protests outside the embassy. people are doing what they can and what is going to work in their community. And I think that's just amazing to see. And we've all got to come together and unite our efforts, because this isn't something that one of us can tackle, or, you know, the academics can. I mean, they're doing an amazing job, you know, risking their lives, as Emma's been saying. And we've got our own responsibilities to fulfill. So, yeah, everyone is coming together, I feel. So,
that's really good. That's very encouraging to hear. I mean, have you also noticed that in terms of, do you publicise your work much, or is it, I mean, what's your relationship with the media as well? Or is it that still, because of so much time having to be spent on working, that it's difficult to get publicity for what you do? I mean,
cynically speaking, my experience with the media is very much story of the day. They ask the stories they want to, so getting out the wider context, the other things that might be happening, is incredibly difficult.
Right.
And as somebody who works more on the policy side of things, I will find that one of the big fears that we have is that then, once it's not story of the day, policy attention and so the money that you kind of need for a lot of this work goes away. So, you know, there was a big sort of media burst and interest when a huge amount of heritage was destroyed in the Balkans in the 90s, and it kind of went away.
Right.
And nothing really changed.
Right.
Iraq happened, and I mean, the levels of destruction of heritage and just the whole tragedy, you know, there's a sudden real feeling, we must do something. You know, look at the looting of the Iraq Museum and the looting of sites, and, you know, all the violence and the destruction of heritage going with that. And then it went away.
Right.
And now, you know, we have this sudden upsurge of interest from the media again with, you know, not just the conflict in Syria and Iraq, but, you know, the sort of problems across the region that we're starting to see now. And, you know, it sounds almost cynical to say, okay, well, how can I capitalise on that before it goes away?
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's been huge advances made this time round, but how do we keep them up?
Yeah.
You know, the UK has just announced £30 million Cultural Protection Fund. That is fantastic. That is amazing. It is for 4 years. We hope and pray it runs past its 4 years, but we can't help the feeling that if, you know, if we can't raise enough awareness this time round, we can't, you know, get people to see that this problem is big and it's not going away, and actually it's getting worse. In 4 years, will that be gone?
Yeah.
And are we, you know, back to being exactly where we were, unable to help? Or
so it's an insecure situation. And also, we've just got 5 minutes, but you're also talking about trying to bring changes in British law, and that you've been trying to do that since 2003. What kind of changes are you trying to bring about?
There's a big piece of international legislation with the amazing snappy title of the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in Armed Conflict. And it regulates both the conduct of our military and also the measures we should take to safeguard cultural heritage during peace.
Right.
So, for example, if our military is on peacekeeping operations, so like the Malian mandate for peacekeeping in Mali with the destruction of the shrines in Timbuktu, had the remit of protecting cultural heritage.
Right.
So you have this legislation that governs how we should do that and the best practice we can do. And the government got very excited after Iraq. Oh, yes, we'll do that. And it went away. They were very excited in 2006 or 8. And it went away. It is on the table now for the first time in absolute seriousness. It has had 2 readings in Parliament, and now Brexit's happened. And there's a real chance it will go away. And that's the thing, so unless we can really raise the awareness there and keep this on the agenda, it will go away.
Right.
Again.
Right. That's, yeah, I mean, we can see that this is how politics works, and this is why everyone is fighting to get their case heard.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just going to, again, remind our viewers, because we've just got a couple of minutes, but again, for people who have been listening and really want to do something about this, look up Heritage for Peace. Heritage for Peace. You can also, if you want to make a note, look up the Endangered Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa. Endangered Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa, which is the project that Dr. Emma Cunliffe is working on. Endangered Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa. Alternatively, search for her online. And you know, again, for people who have been working with Save Muslim Heritage, with Sister Zahra Kazmi as well, and well, you would have told them anyway, but for people who are perhaps got a renewed interest from watching this program, then also, yes, look up Safe Muslim Heritage, but also contact Sister Zahra Kazmi for more information.
Yeah. Well, we're available on Safe Muslim Heritage at gmail.com.
Safe Muslim Heritage at gmail.com. Okay, that's great. And we are just coming to the end, so I wanted to thank you both very much. And I would say that this is a very important point that you made at the very end. So please, everybody, try to jump on board to get this piece of legislation implemented. That's something practical you can do so that people don't feel so frustrated with what's going on and not being able to do something.
Well, just as mentioned, add to that, if that legislation goes ahead, it's going to be protecting when they go into armed forces, go into a certain country. If they're an Islamic country, they know that heritage has to be protected. Right. So it's important we get that pull pushed through. So I think supporting Emma and her team would be fantastic from the Muslim community.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you both for your contribution.
Thank you so much.
And wish you again success, inshallah. Thank you again for your calls, and salam to everybody across the world, especially, again, brothers and sisters in India who are watching today. And inshallah, we will see you again very soon. Assalamu alaikum.